Like most fundraisers, both in person and via Zoom, this event is closed to the press. So if you are a member of the press, thank you so much for being here tonight, but tonight's event is not available for coverage. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Pete Buttigieg.
All right. Well, thank you, Bryn. Thanks everybody for joining and being part of this. And thank you so much, Corey. I'm really excited for us to be able to spend some time. I feel like I'm busy. You are a United States Senator. You're on the ballot. You're doing an amazing amount of work for the Biden-Harris ticket and Democrats at every level. We're teaming up with our committees this evening. I'm just so thankful that we were able to make a claim on your time tonight too. And I want everybody here to know that before Senator Booker and I were involved in the presidential race this past year, I was looking up to him as a role model for U.S. mayors. He was somebody who I think really exemplified a generation of young people who understood the importance of the local, the importance of going home, the importance of rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. And you often heard me on the presidential campaign, if you followed my race at all, talking about how well served we would be if we could get Washington to look a little bit more like our best run cities and towns. And it's very much in that spirit that I wish there were more people in federal office like Senator Booker, who has brought that knowledge and that understanding and that track record of success from his time as mayor of Newark into his service for the people of New Jersey as a U.S. Senator, and throughout it all been a national leader. So that's one of the reasons I'm so excited that we're here. And just saw a mashup video they put together of they asked the Biden-Harris campaign asked each of us to respond to some of what was going on with the debates. And if you get a chance, check that out. You'll see a little bit about how his voice is one of those we're so lucky to have and that I continue to learn from. Look, we all know what's at stake right now. And the thing that amazes me is that if you had told us when we were all among the many Democrats stepping forward a year and change ago to run for president, if you had told us, hey, buckle up, because the stakes are going to get a lot higher, I think we would have looked at you wondering what that could possibly have even meant. And yet here we are. A compound set of crises, a moral crisis over racial injustice in this country, a public health crisis that has claimed about 250,000 lives and counting, an economic crisis touched off by that public health crisis, but honestly, something that also has demonstrated how a lot of families have been in a state of emergency, even when the economy was thought to be on good terms, plus the global crisis of confidence in the United States as nations around the world ask themselves whether they can look to us for leadership ever again. These have all brought us to this moment. And yet the other thing I keep thinking about is, even though we know that 2020 has just sucked, let's be honest, it's just been a terrible year dealing one brutal blow after the other. We're not done with 2020, and the story of 2020 has not yet been fully written. It's not yet locked in, because actually what we're doing right now is together writing what may prove to be the most important chapter in the story of 2020, which is what happened in these elections. And as we return great candidates to office, bring new challengers to office, and most importantly, change what's going on in the White House. I'm convinced we could actually look back on 2020 as the year that we started to shift things in this country in a way that reverberated for a generation and set the tone for a decisive 2020s as a decade that was one in which our country finally did what we've been needing to do for as long as we've been alive on these questions of justice and on these questions of welcoming the need to pay attention to what science and medicine are telling us, paying attention to what it's going to take in order to move forward. But through all of that, both when the spotlight is shining brightly as it is in the Judiciary Committee proceedings over the Supreme Court nomination, and I can tell you from experience, behind the scenes and off stage and in very quiet ways, Cory Booker has been a leader throughout. And so, Senator, I'm really thrilled to be with you. And without further ado, let me pass it over to my friend.
Hey, Pete, thank you so much. You're right. It's a sort of an intense whirlwind now for so many of us, including you, and we're spreading ourselves as far and wide as we can in what is as you've said so eloquently, very much the most consequential election of our lifetimes. And so I'm grateful amidst it all that you and I are going to get a chance to spend some time together tonight, engage with a community, a virtual community that's, I'm looking down at the numbers of people on here, hundreds and hundreds of folks. I'm looking in the chat and seeing people from all over the country who are connected to us. And frankly, we're willing to pitch in some money to the things that you and I are raising money for, which is really, frankly, just for us to get the money out there and put it to work in ways that hopefully will make a difference in these last 9 days, I guess. And Pete, you had generous words for me, but from the time we both were sort of running in this campaign, I felt this sense of kinship with you, because I just enjoyed listening to you so much, because you brought that wisdom that comes from having to manage a multi-million-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars sort of valued organization, which is an American city. And there's something about the hardest job in politics, which is being, and I've been a senator, been a mayor, but being a mayor is the hardest job in all of politics. It sears away the reflexive partisanship, and it's really becomes about how do you serve people, how do you empower people, how do you help people. And listening to you so eloquently represent that plain spokenness that I know some people might want to say is Midwestern. I just say it's mayor speak. It's like, at the end of the day, you got to bring together diverse parts of your community, your city, and do things, build things, fix things. And that's why I'm always just grateful when you and I get a chance to connect. I'm excited about you still. You are one of the bright leaders, I think, in our country as we look to the beginning of the baby boomers really passing the baton over to my generation, Generation Xers, your generation, millennials, and even the Gen Zs now are coming on hard and strong, which is really exciting to me. And so I want to get to the questions, but I want to tell you one of my favorite mayoral stories, Pete, if I can. And it was a time of crisis for us. I was a mayor during a horrible recession, and that was capped off in New Jersey by this really terrible superstorm that came through and hit our city really hard. And I had one of these nights, and again, the great thing about being a mayor, every day is an adventure. I know you know this. You start your day with thinking you have a schedule, but fate laughs at you because sewers collapse, or just stuff happens when you're mayor. And so here I was something happening. It was the fall. It was this month, 2013, and the storm was hitting, and I was in my command center, really concerned about our city and my city. I think, like your city, has a lot of populations that don't have much in terms of material well-being. And I decided to just jump out of my command center vehicle and one more time and just survey streets. And the wind is hitting. It's dark of night. Rain is coming in. The two officers driving me had a hard time keeping the car in a straight line. And then I get one of these calls, Pete, that begins with what I think is the stupidest question, one of the stupidest questions in America. Forgive me for being impolite. The question is, hi, this is the White House operator. Will you hold for the president of the United States? And I'm like, who says no? It's like, I'm like, yeah, sure. And then next thing you know, I'm speaking to my second favorite Obama, not Michelle, but Barack. And he's calling me from the Oval Office. And it was really affirming, man. He was just checking in on me. There was a decency and a generosity about it. Checking in on the city, I should say, even more so the people of the city. It was a great conversation. I hang up with him, and the next call I get, almost as if they timed it, was from the governor of my state, Republican. And crises should sear away partisanship. It was wonderful to see that in Hurricane Sandy. It's horrible not to see it in the middle of this pandemic. And we have a good conversation, again, an affirming conversation. And as soon as I hang up with him, I'm going up a hill, and I see at the peak of the hill, all these trees had come down, taken down telephone poles, and all these wires in the middle of the street. It was just a mess of wood and wire. We start to slow down, and then I see it, and my officers, I think, saw it already, was a guy with a floodlight flashing frantically at us. And so they pulled down, and they pulled with my window facing the guy, and I rolled down my window, and I see this man, elderly man in a slicker, And wind and rain, and I'm sorry, I raised my voice hoping he was going to hear me, but I yell at him. I'm like, "Sir, what are you doing out here?" And this guy looks at me now as if I've asked him the stupidest question in America. And he points at the wires and all the he goes, "Mayor," he goes, "look at that. It's so dangerous. Somebody can come along and get hurt. I'm going to stay here and make sure that doesn't happen." And in that moment, like, I just talked to the president of the United States. I just talked to the governor of my state. I'm the mayor of the largest city in my state. And the greatness I saw that's exhibited that night that I'll never forget, and I don't even know the guy's name, never forget, was the man standing on a hill in the middle of a storm, dark of night, to make sure that other people don't get hurt. And you and I both know this because we've had the privilege of leading in challenging times and seeing that what makes a difference always, it's not the person with the title or the position, it's the American that just is willing to stand for others, often at their own, putting themselves at risk. That to me is greatness. And so this is actually a worse crisis. It's the fourth largest mass casualty event in the history of our country. And you and I have seen and witnessed, as all Americans, just heroism, everyday heroism, happening time and time again. And in this campaign, where real issues are at stake, where people's lives are at stake, it's just it blows me away to see the kind of folks that are stepping up for others, giving of their resources and their time and their energy to ensure the right outcome at the end of this election. So I'm grateful to be here tonight. I needed this, my friend, tonight. I'm leaning on the energy. I'm seeing it all in the chat box already, and just want to give you my love as well. And I don't know, moderating, or are they leaving us alone, which is dangerous? What's the deal?
I think they're going to give us a few minutes, and then somebody will jump in and redirect us to questions. But I know I got a few things I wanted to kick around with you. One, I heard that you were in North Carolina recently, which is so exciting because the fact that on a presidential level, the fact that they have to even defend North Carolina, let alone the fact that it's within our grasp, is encouraging. So I'm just wondering what it felt like on the ground, what you're seeing, and whether it's with candidates you're supporting through the committee that we're raising into right now, or the Biden-Harris campaign, like in your travels and in your kind of virtual conversations. What are you seeing? How are you feeling? And how should we all be feeling, T-minus 1 week?
Well, I'm still traumatized by 2016, where I felt good. So,
yeah.
But the North Carolina trip yesterday was really affirming to me.
Good.
I was going down in the state where there's a very consequential Senate race. If we are going to get the Senate back, we have to win the Cal Cunningham race.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping people are focused on that. And obviously the money we're raising, for me, a lot of the money I'm raising is going out to Senate candidates, key races, or for key initiatives. But on the ground there, I saw exactly what you would think in a battleground state. I went to early voting sites. I went to canvassing kickoffs and a bunch of other things, and saw big crowds, energized people. And then I also saw signs of Trump all over the place. Yeah. So it's sort of like this feel that this state is on the brink, and we need to get it done. And I'll tell you, my dad is from North Carolina, as you may remember from the stories on the campaign trail. He's actually from the mountains of North Carolina, and I think it's congressional district number 11. The Republican nominee said to a reporter who happened to work on one of my campaigns, said that just looked at the reporter accusatory and said, "You went to work for Cory Booker. You're a part of the effort to stop white men from being elected to office." And it's just like, it's just like to see the Republican Party embrace QAnon, people that that are running under their party, or this gentleman, I shouldn't say gentleman, this person who just doesn't even hide the openly racist rhetoric. It just shows me that this party, in many ways, I think the New York Times editorial today talked about this crisis of losing a party that's lost its soul, that's become sort of fully captured by not some governing principle or governing ideology, but captured by Trumpism and the extremes that represents.
Yeah, it's we're seeing the same thing in Michigan. I spent a lot of time in rural Michigan, where Chatson's folks are from, and it's really, I mean, I think those of us who are deeply involved in politics and campaigning we're always told not to get too worked up about yard signs, but it becomes one of the ways you see the momentum, right? And you get a feel for kind of what's happening, both with the people who really want you to know that they're for this president, and then more and more people coming out of the woodwork saying we got to do something different. We could feel that in Wisconsin and Michigan, people looking for, I think a lot of people who voted Republican just habitually throughout their lives, but kind of looking for a little bit of permission to change their mind because they know what's going on is so wrong. And on the other hand, you see these folks just doubling down on what this party's become, right? Which can't be healthy for the Republican Party, let alone for the country.
No, I think that and the article that I read was really interesting, saying about in European countries how a reasonable right of center party does a lot to sort of balance the nation out, confuse the extremes, further isolate the extremes. But this is a Republican Party that now seems to be pulling the extremes into its mainstream, and it's problematic. But I'm happy to see, and I don't know if you're seeing this, and I'd love to hear about your state because it's such a promising state, I think. But I'm just seeing a lot of my people I know. I just had a fundraising call tonight, a quick call, who's told me their mother, who was voting Republican consistently, just said she couldn't do it anymore and is voting for Biden. Yeah, so I'm hearing those anecdotes all over the place.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that too. I think, especially because I think the Biden-Harris campaign has done a great job of creating an atmosphere that welcomes everybody in, right? I mean, to see AOC and John Kasich speaking at the same Democratic National Convention told you how big of a tent we're building, which I think is fantastic. But I'm also noticing some, and I think it's a day late and a dollar short, but still, it must be striking for you as a senator to see your Senate Republican colleagues like Ben Sasse or John Cornyn suddenly trying to open up a little daylight between them and the president. Do you think they're preparing for a post-Trump future where, and again, we're taking nothing for granted, we're going to work to make sure we win, but are they trying to prepare for a future where they want to act like they weren't on board with this, or what's going on with that, and what does it add up to?
So I've never been able to kind of understand the psychology of supporting him in the first place, especially people that we know we have on record, Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, and what they were saying about him right before up until the time he became the nominee and won the election. And so, I do see some spacing. I'm not sure what the thought is in that way, because they have been great enablers. They have failed. They've remained silent, which you and I know from our studies of history is one of the more dangerous things. It's not just the people that are doing wrong. It's the people that are silent in the face of that wrongdoing. And look, let's just be clear. This is a guy who has had, in a way, that former cabinet secretaries, I think and you would understand this as somebody who courageously served in our military, to see General Mattis, I go as far to call him a danger to our democracy, a threat and a danger to our democracy. That's not just saying I disagree with your policies. That's not saying, but he called them a real threat to the continuance of our democracy. So this is not like, and I don't know what Mattis's party is. I know he served for Republicans and Democrats. I always assumed he was a Republican, but there are a lot of people of good conscience that have come out and just said that. So I don't, you're right. It's to me, it's too little too late. And I think history is going to look back at all of those who failed to speak up when he separated children from parents, that when he turned violently on peaceful protesters, when he failed to condemn Nazis. If I can go through the whole thing, that they're going to look like they were, and so many other sad chapters of history, just complicit in his activities.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, James Mattis is not, it must have gone against every fiber of his being to say anything political, let alone to denounce the president he served under, let alone to denounce it in such strong terms. And then that tells you just how serious and just how bad things have gotten. And I'm wondering what, if we hopefully come out of this immediate season heading towards something better as a country, I wonder, where the Republican Party goes. But I'm seeing in the chat box also a lot of folks who are in that category, what I always love to call the future former Republicans, who, again, recognize that you don't have to be a diehard Democrat to believe we need that kind of change and to know that that's what's at stake in the Senate races out there. And it's definitely in the race for the White House. I got to ask you, I know the team will probably jump in a minute and get us some questions from attendees too, but you're in the middle of this process with the Judiciary Committee and the nomination. I think you and I and most Americans believe that the winner of this election that's underway ought to pick the next justice, but we've obviously seen that the Senate GOP which couldn't seem to get its act together to pass COVID relief, but was suddenly ready to work at just absolute warp speed. But I'm wondering, from your experience in there, and I've seen it, you were so eloquent on the committee talking about what's at stake. Is there anything that should either be reassuring that we're not seeing that you can tell us about from the dynamics, or maybe something you're seeing that should just have us even more fired up than based on what we already know?
I hope that we're all more fired up and understand that voting isn't a one-time act. It is a lifetime commitment, and you build change not from one election, but from many. And I still remember, again, these are my great favorite mayor stories. I was mayor of the city of Newark when I went to go vote in 2008. There were lines around the building, and I know you got this as well from your constituents. When I walked up to the end of the line, wrapped around the building, it wasn't people, "Hey mayor, good to see you. Hey mayor, historic day." It's like, don't you think you're cutting in this line? You're waiting like the rest of us. You're not special. So, but 1 year later, I go vote. It's a gubernatorial election, and nobody is there.
Wow.
And it was such a minor victory. Squeaked out, the Republican candidate won, and it's just a symbol that we have got to become consistent, because if we're not, this is what happens. Is Donald Trump gets 3 Supreme Court nominations, 3 members of the Supreme Court now, all nominated by a person that did not get the majority of the electorate, confirmed by a Senate that where the votes for the person were millions of votes. The senators who voted for them represented millions of less votes than the senators who voted against. First time in American history that we've seen that. And so these anti-democratic forces rage when we don't participate in our democracy. And so I just, for me right now, this is a moment where I know you're a Hamilton fan, and there's that rap battle where he sings, "You don't have the votes, you don't have the votes." It's painful to know that at the end of the day, we are coming up short because of very narrow victories in Senate races.
Well, here's our chance to do something about it. But as you said, and this is one of the reasons our PAC is called Win the Era, because to us, this is not, yes, we got to win the election, but we've got to take that longer view. And I think our Republican counterparts did a really disciplined and patient and clever job of that over the last few decades. And I think now is a real moment for us to make sure that we're not getting outclassed in playing that long game. I see Bryn coming back on, so I'm taking that as maybe our cue.
But I want to reinforce that brilliant name of your PAC. Win the Era. It really is not. We got to win this election, but then right away, I'm talking right away, because what if let's just say that the prognosticators are right now, we may get to 51 or 52 Senate seats, and then we have yet again less than 2 years later, there will be elections for Pennsylvania's Senate seat, Wisconsin's Senate seat. And so I love what you're saying, and I hope that people here will consider, if you've contributed $1, maybe consider contributing 2 or 3. But then when the election's over, this habit that people have, and it's beautiful stories. Today I was on with Brian Schatz and Chris Murphy and some other senators raising for the Georgia race, and just to hear these stories of people who said, "Look, I haven't been able to go to work, but I'm going to give you $2. I'm going to give you $3."
Wow.
Those stories just really moved me. And but at the same time, you and I both have in our family history, I'm sure, the same stories of the Depression or World War II. My grandmother, Black woman, Detroit, buying war bonds just to be a part of the effort. So this is really one of those times where do what you can. And your PAC, I'm hoping, thrives in after this election as much as it is thriving now during it.
Thanks. Yeah, that's if there was ever a time to be kind of gathering our energies for a very long project, it's now.
Yeah. Bryn is here. I don't know if everybody who's watching can see Bryn. Bryn has been telling me what to do. You get to be a United States senator, and you still have Bryn, who's appallingly young. I mean, I think you can drink now, Bryn, legally. And,
yes. I can. Well, I'd love to get to some questions from some guests. So here's the first one. Hi, Corey and Pete. We're participating today with our kids and our family, ages 5, 7, and 10.
Oh, great.
They may have the most at stake in this election that will determine our nation's future. They'd like to know, since they can't yet vote or phone bake, what could they do to help?
Oh, what a great question. And, I think one thing I always noticed as mayor was that you didn't even have to be old enough to vote to make a difference, because of all the ways I saw decisions go a little differently when young people spoke their minds. And, you can be a long way from voting age and still in a position to support a candidate and to let people know what this means to you. I mean, to me, the biggest thing is when you are that young and you're looking into the eyes of a grown up, and you're asking them questions like, what are you going to do to keep me safe? What are you going to do to make sure the climate is okay for me to grow up in and thrive? What are you going to do to help with problems like guns in our communities? There's something that goes off in the heart of any thinking grown up when they get a question like that from a child that sets off this little voice that says, do not let this young person down. And there's a huge power in that. And actually, I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of the most powerful movements going on right now, asking elected officials to do a better job and do things differently. The movement on climate change, the movement on racial justice, the movement on gun safety. A lot of these have been powered by people, some of them not yet old enough to vote. And so whether it's just asking those questions, talking to parents, talking to your friends, getting them to talk to their parents, coming along for volunteering when we can do safe volunteering, even in the pandemic era, moral support, even just encouraging people who are involved in campaigns the same way you encourage friends or people you're on a team with. All of us can do that, no matter your age. And the more of us do that, the more we remind each other that these elections are about all of us, not just people in office, not just voters, but every one of us who lives here in the country has a lot at stake. And honestly, the younger you are, the longer you're planning to be here, the more it matters for your life, how we do right now. These decisions that we're not going to get a do-over on, the decisions we're about to make on climate in the next few years will decide how things go for the rest of the century. It's the same on our economy. It's the same on racial justice. So it's a great question, and kudos to you for bringing the young ones in your life along, so that we're all part of this as a family effort.
And Pete, you would add, right, that I was sort of surprised when I was coming up, beginning to realize how young great leaders in American history were. Like our founders were many of them were in their early 20s when they were founding a nation. And
That's right.
Every great movement for social justice in this country, the civil rights movement was driven by people that were young. And so whenever I get asked questions about young people, I always want to just turn questions around on them. Like even your kids, that as young as they are, ask them what they would do. And you've got this perspective now, I'm sure. Like when I started my career in my 20s, I was just thinking way out of the box and doing things that, hunger strikes and living in a mobile home and parking it on drug corners. I would have my staff would be afraid. I'd be coming up with ideas of trying to drive change. Many of them fell flat on their face, but I was willing to experiment and try. Yeah. And so I just would say that I try never to advise young people about what their tactics should be, because they come up with more creative ideas than I would. Yeah. So try asking your kids. You might be surprised. Maybe they'll want to do a song or theater and put it online. They'll be embarrassed in 10 years, terribly, but you just never know the creative ideas they'll think about. And Pete, this one of my favorite moments in history. Taylor Branch, I think, calls it in the book Parting the Waters. I think he calls it the Children's Miracle, the title of this, where Martin Luther King is failing in Birmingham. And he finally listens to two of his young lieutenants, Dorothea Cott and James Bevel, and they end up doing this incredible stand against Bull Connor. Kids 8 years old to 18 years old, first time in the modern civil rights movement that all the jails were filled in the city because of the creative protests of these children that ended up waking up the conscience of the whole country. And segregation in Birmingham fell within weeks of the kids getting out there and doing it. So I just think it's wonderful that you're asking that question. My challenge to you is ask your kids, how would they like to participate? What's a creative idea to make a difference in this election? You never know what they're going to do or think of trying and try it.
Love that.
Awesome. Here's another question. Do you have any
Bryn,
guidelines?
Bryn, did you take that picture behind you?
I wish. No, I did not.
Okay, because that's
It's a
impressive.
beautiful beach.
It's beautiful artwork there, Bryn. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past you if you.
Yes.
I was
Okay.
standing. I was one of these guys. These like because I've got nothing. I look like a hostage video here. But Pete, his background, he looks like he's like hard at work, learned. That's like this like a lot. What is that like your office or is it?
Yeah, this is actually the attic. So, and most of the credit goes to Chasten for civilizing our attic. But I think he was just looking for a space that he didn't have to deal with me and my phone calls and everything. Then wound up being the best space in the house to set up a little, get a little studio going. So I'm proud of, that Twitter account that rates everybody and their Zoom stuff. So I started out at a 4, and that motivated me to up my game a little bit. So we're doing a lot better now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Bryn, why have you gotten the next question out?
Okay.
Why are you
Do you guys have any guidelines for reacting to the results of the presidential election, regardless of the outcome? What can we do to unite people of the United States?
Pete, go ahead, man.
All right. I mean, I'll be really eager to hear how you think of this too. But I think so much now depends on, first of all, focusing on our lives, just how life in a very everyday, very intimate way is affected by the choices we're making, because it turns out our objectives for our own everyday lives are so well aligned as Americans across very different walks of life. Another thing I think is really going to matter is to focus on results. And again, this is part of how, our experience as mayors, I think, has shown us, I'm sure you had similar experiences. Not only was it the case that you could never predict just based on somebody's party. When I was dealing with our legislative body, for example, our council, you never really knew just because somebody was a Democrat or Republican where they were going to line up. But also somebody who was just the absolute thorn in your side on one issue, and you couldn't come to terms, and you're getting ready to really let them have it. And then next thing you know, they're the swing vote that delivers your budget or something you really needed, because we were focused on what actually mattered and not just locked into these kind of categories all the time. And again, most Americans actually agree with the things we're proposing to do. A strong majority of Americans, including independents and quite a few Republicans, think that wages need to be higher, that the wealthiest need to pay their fair share, that we need to take some common steps on gun reform, that support the idea, no matter where you come down in your religious beliefs, that we trust women to make their own decisions about their own health and about their own bodies. We've got to invest more in education, that what's going on with the pandemic and the response is not good enough, that climate change is real. I mean, on issue after issue after issue. There is way more consensus and majority among the American people than there is on the floor of the House or the Senate. And so this is a chance to, I think, do a lot of that work. And then I also think we can't just assign all of this to politics and politicians to do all the work of unifying America. This is also a social issue. This is one of the reasons I'm a big believer in service. The military is not for everybody, but I came to trust my life to people radically different from me. Because we were put into a tough place with a big job to do. And I think there are ways for more Americans to have that experience without having to go to war to get there, with opportunities for a voluntary service that we know so many people would step up and be part of if we created more options. So this is partly certainly the job of the right kind of tone and priorities being set out of Washington, but some of it has nothing to do with Washington. And that's a bigger project that I know the kinds of people who are on this call who care about these issues are motivated to do, both through your political work and completely outside of politics.
So Pete, the question, and I'm not sure, I have to listen to it again slowly. I just want to say something to what I think may have also been a part of that question, but really dive into what you said, because I think that's really important part. So first is, when the election, the day after election, I just want to, we all got to prepare people that we might not know the results for a week or two, right? And we fill that void with our voices, and not let people try to delegitimize the election itself or try to throw conspiracy theories. I know this from intelligence reports. I think many Americans have heard some of the stuff that's been said out there, that the Russians and others are going to try to pounce on that insecurity period where if the election goes beyond the election night, I think you're going to just see a lot of chaos, people trying to sow chaos. And I just hope that all of us will speak calmly and directly towards the moment that we're in and counter any of that programming. But Pete, I think that you're one of the people whose campaigns I admired because you spoke a lot to these issues of decency and civility, and that the lines that divide us are not as strong as the ties that bind us, that there is still common cause in America, that our politics don't speak to the degree to which we're unified. And I really just so appreciated that in you, and that it is that sort of everyday heroism of individual acts of grace, a revival of civic grace altogether, that I think that you are one of the great leaders who speaks to it in our country. And I really want to just double down on what you said, which is just challenging people to understand that this is not about what Biden says or Kamala say. It's what we say every day and how we treat people, and recognize that that we are that there is injury and wound in this country, and people who are hurting, that the 50 million people that might vote for Donald Trump, they're not our enemy. In fact, they are essential to our destiny. And that if we can't find ways to create those connections and those linkages, then we are going to lose out on opportunities for our children or our families. And we can't get to where we want to go if we are going to further tear this country apart. And you then said something to me about like that unexpected vote that you end up getting, and you and I probably had moments like that with our city councils. But stop me if I've told you this story, Pete, but one of my favorite moments as a senator was when I decided to go to Bible study in Chairman Inhofe's office. He's considered to be a pretty right-wing senator. And when I was first sitting in his hideaway, the more senior senators have these gorgeous hideaways right by the Capitol. And these, I walk into this, spacious room, labyrinth of a room, and then I sit down, and my implicit bias made me surprised that when I saw a picture on his shelf, it was of him and a black girl. And I just didn't expect it. And I asked him about it, and he had adopted that black girl.
Wow.
And I was very, very moved by the story and the circumstances. And again, it shook my implicit biases. I would never have expected that. But months later, there's an education bill going through the Senate, and the manager of the bill, Lamar Alexander, through deals he had made with other people much higher up in seniority than me, was no amendments on this bill. It's going to go through. But I was kind of upset. This was one of the ones that it was No Child Left Behind, and then they swung the pendulum back towards letting states do what they want on these issues. But I'm sorry, I like accountability. I wanted the states to be forced to disaggregate their data so we could see how different vulnerable subgroups were doing. How are the black children doing? How are the, and some of those subgroups are foster kids and homeless kids. And if you create, this from being a mayor, that if you can measure it, suddenly you can hold whoever those actors are better accountable. So I wanted the data out there so that advocates can better hold states accountable for how they're treating the more vulnerable children. So I had this amendment, no chance of getting it on, but I remember about Inhofe, and I go over him and I talk to him about vulnerable children. And I'll never forget, it's one of my favorite moments on the Senate floor, as I go across the aisle, have my conversation. He goes, "I'll think about it." And he took the card explaining it, and I walk back over my side, way in the back row, where us junior folks hang out. And next thing you know, I see him making a beeline for me. And he hands me the card back, and he goes, "I'm in." And he turns around and starts walking away. And I'm like, "What does that mean?" And I ran up and I go, "Excuse me, Chairman, what do you mean?" He goes, "I will co-sponsor your amendment." And next thing you know, my amendment becomes law of the land. And so I don't think it would have happened if I did not have that human connection. And so we all have those moments where, and grace by its very definition, another reasons why I love you. You're sort of like me in the sense that both of us would rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. But we are both guys of faith, and I love how you are so comfortable about talking about it in a public context. And so the ideal of grace is unearned kindness. And we've all been needing grace, even though we weren't worthy of it in our lives. All of us have been jerks before or done wrong. And so grace is that. So even if a person, you're so mad at them,
Yeah.
but that the power of grace still is an essential ingredient to redemption. And if we're going to redeem the soul of this country, all of us have to take responsibility for acting with more of that grace. Pete, and I know you believe this because I see it in you.
What a great story, and what a great way to think about this, because you're right, we're going to need more of that than ever. And you know, a bit more tactically, I'm glad you're involved in preparing one another and ourselves for the possibility that we might have a few days where we're still finding out, either in the Senate races or the presidential or both. And look, after Iowa, I would argue that I know as much as anyone walking this earth how it feels to really, really want election results the night that the vote happened and not get them. But in this case, it's not because of something going wrong. It could be because of people doing their job with integrity. And, you know, on the front end, we're going to be the first to sound the alarm about any voter suppression issues, as we've been doing. But on the back end, if people are trying to come in and delegitimize the election, especially if it's because they didn't like what the result is looking like, we got to make sure we stand firm, and that's going to take a lot of discipline. So I'm glad you're thinking ahead to that, because it's on my mind a lot.
There'll be a lot of debates about, I know in my world, about the filibuster rule and court reform and all of these things. And you know, I think something again, and again, this is parts of the reason why I respect you, is because you seem to be one of those people that really understands that you can be tough in fighting for what's right and still be kind. You don't need to be mean.
Yeah.
You know, you can be strong without being vicious. You know, and in fact, in fact, some of the greatest strength that you see is in the heroes of mine, from Gandhi to King, is people that showed an extraordinary strength, but are still so dignified and so generous of spirit. During the presidential campaign, I was really trying to find things I could read that would give me a language that would help better improve my language in an era of Trump. And there's this book called The Radical King, about sort of, you know, King died incredibly unpopular. I mean, most Americans disapproved of Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And he was on economic issues. He would be with us on the cutting edge of the progressive part of the Democratic Party. But yet, one of his speeches, he goes through this act of, like, he talks about the racist person, and then he starts going through in his speech to other people, like, well, we must remember that he must have grown up in a household where this was fed to him like breakfast cereal. Like, he starts forcing everybody to actually be more empathetic to the racist. That didn't mean that he wasn't doing everything he could to stop that racist from hurting people or doing the things, but he still found a way, in a radical way, to extend to that person empathy and understanding. And it was, and it didn't cheapen or weaken his ability to be a strong advocate and fighter for what was right. And that's the balance that we need. You may have heard this because it happened at the beginning of my presidential campaign. It was one of my favorite moments of my campaign, is when I'm running to a debate stage and I'm about to jump on in Iowa, and a guy at the bottom of the stage just looks at me and goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I look at him and I go, "Dude, that's a felony." and then got up in my town hall and just tried to talk to what I was reading at that moment, which is this idea that we cannot be that which we're trying to replace. And that energy, if we bring that negative energy, it's just going to double down and create more of it, as opposed to finding a way to raise our nation up. And again,
so important.
Yeah, and you were one of those people who were running that I thought could give a master class in that way you talk.
I think that's such an important thing for us to bear in mind. And I've seen the power of that kind of thinking right here in Indiana. I mean, under Governor Mike Pence, right? Part of what turned the tide on equality in this state was a way of people finding and encountering and talking to each other, not painting people into a corner, who maybe didn't grow up with a very progressive way of thinking about LGBTQ equality, for example, but kind of beckoning them onto the right side of history rather than dragging them there. That didn't involve in the least bit watering down what we were saying, what we believed, but through that, I saw so many people of different political backgrounds and stripes come together, and it was part of how we were able to force the then governor Pence to reverse his position and step back. And having seen with my own eyes the power of that, I think we're going to be in for a season where it'll be needed more than ever. And this will be, of course, it's going to be different anyway because of what's going on with the pandemic. But my hope is that this Thanksgiving or the conversations around this Thanksgiving season will be a little different than any of the last few years, where I think a lot of us were dreading those, encounters with family members that we could barely see eye to eye with on these issues, because we're still going to have those divisions, but we're going to be in a very different place as a country on the back end of an election.
Well, I'm reading some of these compliments. Jamie is saying Pete has talked about having empathy for homophobic people because of their life experience and what they've learned, and I think that's powerful. It's one thing for me to be empathetic towards somebody who's sexist, but for you to be the target of the hate, and to still find some way to extend to them, to see their humanity, to not see them as the lowest. I always say, well, everybody's a mountain range. We all have peaks and valleys. So not to define their totality of their being based upon their hate for you, which is hard when it's hard not to personalize them. That's a powerful exhibition of grace in and of itself. And that doesn't mean, I love Martin Luther King's quote. He says, I can't pass a law to change a person's heart, but I can pass laws to restrain the heartless. I can't pass a law to make you love me, but I can pass a law to stop you from lynching me. It doesn't mean that we're still not going to stand strong on our LGBTQ issue.
Right.
But to show that grace, there is something that gives a person a pathway from healing. One of I had this incredible moment right before I decided to run. Not decided to run, right before I declared that I was running, Pete, where I got to fly into Georgia, into Atlanta, meet up with John Lewis, and then do a road trip to go see Jimmy Carter. And you want to talk about just having hours full of two men that live this idea and also have that senior status of perspective that you and I are still working our way towards, and to hear John Lewis tell stories in his own life of that transition of somebody who beat him coming to his office asking for redemption. And sometimes if you give that person a pathway, it may take them 20 years to walk it, but we still have to give everybody a pathway that acknowledges their humanity and that we're all souls in development.
Well, it's funny. I think of the two of them so often too, as it happened the last day of my campaign, as I was going through my mind, realizing it was time to bring it to a close. The very last day, it started with breakfast with the Carters in Plains.
Are you serious?
And then, wonderful conversation. As you know, and I know they think really highly of you, and we were talking about you and a lot of other people in that race. But we were talking about, how, as you know, you just, it feels like a benediction just to be around the Carters. And then a couple hours later, got on a plane to go to Selma, because that was the day of the observance of the anniversary of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And it was the last time I saw John Lewis alive. And he came out and he urged everybody to vote. And as you know, I mean, when you get into politics, especially when things go well and you find yourself dining at these very high tables, meeting the people and eventually being invited to join the people in charge, or encountering the people who you've watched for a long time, who kind of run the world, a lot of times what you notice about them is they're just people. I mean, they're impressive, very intelligent, very established. For whatever reason, you understand why they are where they are, but you also realize they're just human beings, just like you are, and they're not on another plane of existence. But two people who, at least to me, it always felt like I was in the presence of somebody who was just next level, like had attained a different level of existence, right? Was John Lewis and President Carter as well. They just, and it's part of it's that grace that you're talking about, right? They just live and breathe it. And it's something to aspire to that I think is way beyond, anything in politics, but is exactly the kind of thing our politics needs a lot more of.
Yeah, so my October's the month that I got elected to the United States Senate, 6 days before my dad died. And since it was a special election, I raced down to Washington to get sworn in. The sort of the buffeting I got was my mom very wisely, with some campaign team, decided, missing my father, she and I were both grieving. We went right before I got sworn in, and we went to see John Lewis. And his office was like a civil rights museum, except for he was all the pictures. um, and, uh, and what I remember about that most stunning, and it's amazing, the little things you remember, is that he would not let my mom and I get up. He had prepared a little buffet of eggs and grits and stuff. He wouldn't let us get up. He was serving us food, and it was. And then he had these words of grace to me that were very, very moving about what it meant. And then I leave him. Here it is, October 2013. I walk across the Capitol. My mom leaves me like I'm going off to summer camp. And next thing you know, I'm on the Senate floor being sworn in by Joe Biden, who is, as you and I both found out from our competing against him, is another man of a deep decency and honor. And these are the special moments you will realize. But I think the thing about John Lewis that goes to what you were saying, my friend, is that I always say that the biggest thing you can do in any day, and you've had big speeches, man, you've had big crises in City Hall, but I still come to believe this in all my experiences, that the biggest thing you can do in any day most often is always going to be a small act of kindness, decency, or love to another human being. And if we can do those more consistently and more consciously and with more moral imagination to see in those small moments a chance for you to do something that seems small but will leave a lasting impact on the life of others, that to me, a life lived like that is a life of great impact, no matter what your position and title is.
Well said.
Great. Well, we do have about 5 more minutes of your guys' time, so I'd love to give you guys some final remarks and thoughts you guys would like to leave.
I'm going to let Pete have the last word. And I'm just going to say one more time how grateful I am that everybody would come on here, and the numbers that just keep coming up. Usually I do these things, Pete, and numbers drift down during the conversation, but this time, so I just want everybody to know who's a part of this community. And I've been reading I've never seen a chat that's got me this most. People are putting quotes up there, Pete, and it's really been moving to see that on the side here. So I just want to thank everybody tonight. It's been, for me personally, this has been a very long stretch on the Judiciary Committee, watching the impending moment, which is most likely going to be tomorrow, where the final vote's going to be, unless we see a John McCain moment where 2 of my colleagues on the Republican side change their mind or vote against us. We'll see the confirmation of somebody who just, I fear for what they'll do to healthcare and the sanctity an individual has over their body and LGBTQ issues. So it's one of those times where I think, Pete, I once heard that it might have been a basketball coach who said, or a football coach that said something like, the secret of greatness is to be able to meet discouragement after discouragement and not lose enthusiasm, you know? And so it's just been one of those moments where I feel like I'm leaning on people, and it's just been good to end up tonight with everybody and to be a part of a beloved community, frankly. And from the lines in the chats, people weren't saying that you and I should go take our grace and our empathy and throw it out because we want to fight. It was actually an affirmation of that spirit. So I just feel grateful to everybody. I want to please ask folks to stay with us. I think that the title of Pete's pack, a purposeful pack, I should say, is really, really right. If this is an era and we have to stay at it, we can't get weary, we can't get tired. We have to have those indefatigable spirits. So I hope you'll stay with us. I hope you'll stay connected. For people here that were drawn on this platform because of me, please plug into Pete's world. He's doing exciting things. Follow him on social media. Learn about how you can get involved in his efforts. He, like my friend Stacey Abrams and Beto, are doing, who became sort of national figures when people couldn't pronounce their names, have really used the blessing of their notoriety and like laser beams have focused the energy on really purposeful, really important things. And Pete, I read the beginning of your book and found it really really moving. Just off the bat, you get right into it, and it was very, very. So I also want to encourage people to pick up his book, which is really, really, I think, special and something that it's the right book for these times. And then finally, I'll just say thank you for helping me to be a more of an impact player in this campaign. Everybody who contributed anywhere from $1 to $100 tonight, you really have helped both Pete and I to be more impactful at a time of urgency. And then the last thing is, I hope that you all will commit yourself. The greatest gift you can give to me tonight is if you commit yourself to doing something you weren't originally planning on doing over the next 8 or 9 days. Maybe give 1 more hour of volunteering on making phone calls. Maybe do like I did. I had somebody challenge me, and I remembered, oh my God, I hadn't checked in with a family member who was in a key state that is suspect to me. And I reached out, and it was worth it. And so think about somebody in your world. Do something you weren't planning on doing in the cause of this election. That would be the gift to me. And with that, I'll hand it over to Pete.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And by the same token, if you're here by way of being part of, having been part of Pete for America or Win the Era, I hope you'll, you can see, if you didn't already know it, that you know, Senator Booker is our kind of leader and our kind of Democrat. And so make sure to stay involved, follow him, and keep tabs on what he's doing, because, you know, what he's doing with this committee that you're supporting and where we're teaming up is making sure that we can be there for people who share our values, for the campaigns and the issues that matter to us. And so everyone on this call, you've been generous financially to help us in whatever way you could. So thanks for that. And if you can continue, please do. This is such a critical moment, and it's also in many ways just the beginning, we hope, of what is to come. There's so much at stake, and yet this isn't just about what we're up against. We all know what we're up against. This is about what we have a chance to be here for, and we could be so proud of 2020, which is a weird set of words to hear together given everything we've been through, but we could be proud of 2020 and what it led to. And thanks so much, Corey.
Yeah, please. Grab the book, everybody. Grab the book.
Awesome. And thanks for that. I know something I wanted to put out before the election, because I do think it's such an important issue, you know, building trust in our institutions, trust in each other, getting the world to trust America in new ways. And so much of that's at stake in the things that we have a chance to do right now. But we're doing it. And I see just from the spirit of the people, you see it filling the chat. And look, online chat feeds are not always very, very uplifting places. So we are literally modeling what we hope to see more of in terms of the spirit here. And I'm so glad of it, because we're going to need that spirit even more after election season than we have going into it. So here's to the home stretch the next few days, and then the era that we have a chance to open up and launch together. And I know that good work is waiting for all of us in some way. So Corey, it's a treat to be with you. I always feel it fills my sails to spend time with you and your contagious energy and hope alongside your intellect. And everybody, thanks for lifting us up, because it really does. We're not Energizer bunnies. You know, we're on the ballot or out there. We draw energy from you, and I see it among everybody who's here. Let's make sure by the next time we're speaking, we got a lot to celebrate. Until then, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.